All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining today's Tech Talk. My name is Brian Ashley. I'll be the host. We've got quite the cast of technical heavy hitters today, and we're going to go through some discussions on 2022 secure cloud networking predictions. So to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and do all of the intros for everybody. So joining us today is Shahzad Ali, who is a VP of our Customer Solutions Architect, Noman Mustafa, who is the Global VP of our Solutions Architect team, Manny Calero, who is Director in our Solutions Architect team, Hamad Alam, who is a VP for Solutions Architects in the Americas, and Brian Woodworth, who is a Product and Solutions Manager inside of our Solutions Management team. We'll hit a couple of various topics. There's a Q&A portal in your Zoom link, so feel free to put any questions there. We will have some time at the end to address those questions live. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And for our first topic, we will turn it over to Shahzad Ali to take us through some cloud security predictions for this year. Shahzad?
All right, thanks, Brian. If you can move to the next slide, I can start my predictions. Yeah, so before I go and talk about different areas and predictions, the overarching prediction is that it's going to be very cloudy with the chance of a lot of vulnerabilities and cybersecurity attacks, right? So that's the overall prediction I have. And this is not changing. I mean, this is unfortunate, but we know the world that we live in, these attacks are not reducing, they're not changing, they're going to be increasing, right? And then there are some market trends that we are seeing out there in order to mitigate those attacks. So I'm going to be talking about that as well. But the first and foremost thing is about the network security itself, right? If you follow the on-premise architecture, the security was an afterthought. There was a parameter firewall or next generation firewall sitting somewhere. So there is a realization in the industry now that this has to change, right? And now people are talking about the network security, okay? So the security that is embedded inside the network is part of the networking DNA. It's part of the networking fabric and network architecture. Could be cloud architecture or multi-cloud architecture, right? So that is something that you will see keep changing. People are drifting towards that. People will be adopting towards those models. So that is something you will see as part of the data plane because it has to be pervasive, right? It's something when you're shipping the data from one place to another place, it has to be secure. There should not be a bump in the wire or a third-party firewall that you have to go through in order to implement the security. The threat prevention, the threat guard, threat detection, all should be part of the network security, the architecture there, right? So that's number one. Now moving on towards a little bit of applications. So as we know that majority of the applications are now deployed in the microservices fashion. And a lot of code that you see is now also running as serverless. So we have AWS Lambda, then in Google, we have Cloud Functions. So now the bad actors are kind of moving in that direction because there are still areas where they can poke, big holes, right? So they will be focusing more on those type of services. And the nature of these microservices is that in order to protect these services, again, you have to go back and provide it as part of your network fabric, right? So we will see those type of attacks in future in 2020 and beyond. So keep an eye on that. Then we are also looking into more attacks towards the CSP services, the cloud provider services, right? So when you look at the services they offer, there are a number of services, and then the problem is that these services are interdependent on each other, right? So if I'm using some IoT type service or some DevOps type service, if they attack on that, it can actually bring down the entire region, entire availability zone, your overall network, right? So it's very serious. It's not like it's an isolated service that was attacked and then only the relevant applications were impacted by that. It can create a ripple effect along those lines. Then we have also seen the attacks on the API itself, right? So API is a big deal. Obviously, everything is running through API these days. So if the API services are going down, it can impact your application in a very big way. Okay. Now, in the past, we have seen ransomware kind of on the rise. We have seen very sophisticated supply chain type attacks. We have seen pipelines being hit and whatnot. So this ransomware is again going to increase. It's not going to slow down. A number of companies are offering services, exclusively to mitigate these ransomware type attacks. You have seen Azure came out with their own very specific service in order to tackle that. So this is something you have to be serious about, and this is something you need to take into consideration. Again, going back to the network security element, right? Because you cannot be dependent on the legacy ways of protecting these type of new sophisticated attacks. The threat prevention, threat guarding, intrusion detection, it has to be part of your network fabric. It has to be part of your data plane. So again, Aviatix is very strong in this area. We have this multi-cloud network architecture, which is applicable to single cloud, multiple clouds, and we have published blogs and a white paper on this topic. So I will recommend you guys to take a look there. Another trend that we are seeing now, which will continue in 2022, is about the legacy security vendors, the next generation firewall vendors. So they have been there for long, but unfortunately they are not adopting the cloud as they should, right? So in the process, they are becoming kind of irrelevant. If you look at their deployment model, their design models, active standby model, or punting the traffic from one place all the way to on-prem or some other location, this is something is not gelling really well with the way cloud works. So there was a gap. So CSPs, they started offering their own next generation firewall services, right? The layer 7 services and whatnot. So we will see this trend where these third-party legacy vendor will kind of become irrelevant unless they redefine themselves, right? So that is what going to happen. And like I said, industry as a whole is moving towards the network security element, and which actually falls into this bucket as well. CSPs will provide that, but again, CSP can only do this for their own cloud, right? So you need to have a holistic approach, a multi-cloud approach, where again, Aviatix is the player providing those type of services. The last but not the least is it all boils down to visibility. So no matter how beautiful your architecture is, no matter how powerful a CSP is, the visibility has been a challenge since day one, right? So you need to have visibility into your traffic flows, into your data flows, where exactly your packets are going in towards, right? There has to be a trend that you're detecting. There are anomalies that you should be detecting as part of your flows. Unfortunately, if you're relying on one CSP and their services, you're not getting any visibility. Most of the time, they're like black boxes. You cannot even do ping or trace route and whatnot, right? So the visibility is extremely important in order to provide a proper security architecture and security model in the cloud. And as a trend, what I see, as a prediction, what I see that people will be complaining more about the visibility to their CSPs, and they will be moving towards partners like Aviatix to provide this deep visibility and network operations capabilities.
Shazad, thanks so much, man. That was great. Let me ask you a question. Actually, I'll open this up to the group as well. I think you hit on a lot of different points on how the security sort of threat landscape is changing quite a bit. If we kind of bubble that up, what does that really mean to businesses, right? I mean, like, are we talking, I mean, you touched a little bit on compliance and audit, but, what is in trying to solve these problems, what does it really mean to an organization and the services that it provides to the customers that it has?
Yeah, so for the business, we can talk about these technical challenges, these predictions, days and weeks and whatnot. But really, what we need to look into, we need to look into if these are these elements are solving the business challenges or not. And the biggest business challenge, obviously, is the application availability. The business is dependent on the application that you have out there, right? It could be airline, the chaos sitting in one of the airport location. It could be a mobile application where you need to log in and then check your finances, or see if your insurance company is billing you properly or not, right? And if these things are not properly secure, that's a business challenge, because if application is down, you're losing revenue. There are millions and billions of dollars that can be lost just by not having one API running somewhere, right? So for the business, for the digital transformation, for the availability of application, this becomes a big problem if this is not designed and architected properly with the proper security in mind.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, great. Well, with that, thanks so much, Shahzad. Let's move on to the next topic. So for this one, we're going to turn to Brian Woodworth. Brian, there's a lot of talk around, a lot of the cloud computing pushing out to the edge and what that means, and 5G and everything else. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what does the edge computing sort of look like going into the new year, and what sort of predictions do you have related to that?
Sure. There's a lot of moving pieces here, so I've kind of tried to boil it down to two essential discussion points, right? This is a little reductionist, but in order to kind of conquer this topic in 10 minutes, we kind of have to be concise. So there is an axis where we're seeing consolidation or a pinching out of the internet or the last mile along private connectivity to cloud, and then a very similar but different pinch happening for public edge and micro devices and IoT. So let's unpack this a little bit and look at some of the factors behind why the industry is converging this way, and what problems it aims to solve with this, and how the CSPs are kind of muscling in, which they really are, and it's going to change a lot of the fundamentals with our thought process along app design and security and edge connectivity, right? I think we're going to see tremendous transformation here, more so than maybe other pieces of the industry over the next 5 to 10 years, and it's a brave new world. So, all right, unpacking the private piece, I've identified 4 driving factors that are involved in this pinch: speed, security, big data, and the move to multi-cloud in general. So we'll dive a little more deeply into each of those topics. So for speed, this is all about heritage workloads. A lot of the enterprise workloads that are subject to lift and shift and brownfield are not modern. We call them heritage to be polite and gentle. Legacy would be kind of a more brutal term, but they're not ready to be transformed into an HTTPS web-driven economy. They're private, they are internal applications, they're not meant to be internet first. And when you lift and shift them in part or whole, mostly in part, which is hybrid, it's rare to greenfield them and do them all at once. You stretch that networking line between them and the cloud like so much taffy, right? And that stretching causes what we call bandwidth delay product. Even if you have a big fat pipe, the latency causes the application to misbehave and be unpredictable. So there's a lot of work here to try to resolve that. And the mantra here, I call this the new hybrid, is that if you're slow, you're down, right? Your application just can't lag. It can't have a poor end user experience. It needs to feel slick and immediate. So you have things like moving in for enterprise to let them connect in, big connectivity platforms to cloud like ExpressRoute, Direct Connect, Google Cloud, Interconnect to bring in the MPLS there. But then now we have, so that's Moses coming to the mountain, as I say. But now we have the mountain moving to Moses as well to really unlock further workloads that weren't even able to take advantage of, say, Direct Connect and so forth. And that's like AWS Outpost and Azure Local Zone. So these cloud stacks that are being reduced to a smaller footprint and then moved into these colos and meet-me's. And then I'd mentioned security, that's critical. So here it's the big privatization of workloads. So earlier on in cloud, 2017, 2018, there was this kind of idea that PaaS and SaaS would rule the market and that people would be swiping credit cards and enterprise would be agile. But it turns out, of course, IaaS was the big mover and shaker, right? And so security became paramount here. These internal apps did not need to face or shouldn't face the internet or have public edges out. So private connectivity came to rule the roost. And if you just want an indication of this, look at the stock value of Equinix, right? It's completely up and to the right with the same variations that any stock market has, but Equinix and their competition like Interaction and Cologix have been extremely successful here in this market. And security is hugely top of mind for these internal apps, and to have them run over the internet is just a non-starter for many enterprises. And then big data, the piece there is just big pipes, right? The internet isn't going to be the appropriate for reliability, consistency, and throughput mechanism for transporting and dealing with big data sets, that we use for AI and ML. We're seeing a lot of customers, go 10 gig, 100 gig for this kind of thing. And that's all to be had in this private connectivity space in these colos. And the multi-cloud in general, right? So these cloud connectivity providers, Megaport, Equinix, NetBond, Verizon Secure Cloud Interconnect, Lumen, etc., have these marketplace offerings, right? Where when you connect to them, you don't get to one single service. It's not monolithic. You get to AWS, Google, Oracle, Azure, Silver Peak, Salesforce. It's like this new shopping arena, right? And so that, in many ways, they also predicted the rise of multi-cloud, or maybe even nurtured it and curated it. It's an interesting feedback loop. But if I can plug in and get fat fiber to one of these places and then use that to slice and dice across multiple clouds, that's going to drive a lot of action. Okay, so now let's talk about the purple arrows, which is the internet stuff going on. So in addition to private collapsing and squeezing telcos out of that play, we see a tremendous amount of inertia here on the public side. This is, unlike a heritage workload, your modern, more greenfield, smart device, web-enabled, digital transformation kind of workload, internet first, if you will, right? So cloud's going to muscle internet out. They know that they're going to hold these big workloads, and they are going to hold all the data and do all the transformation for them with AI and ML and data analysis and so forth. So they are pushing their POPs heavily out. They're investing billions of dollars. I think Azure is over 160 POPs now. Google is over 140 POPs. I don't have the, metric in my mind for AWS, but they're no slouch either, right? They're going to be pushing out pretty hard. So each time one of these big clouds builds a new POP, they reorganize internet connectivity to that POP, which is where their cloud public edges with all these critical security services for modern workloads that compete with the kind of the old guard here, who are still relevant, but being challenged, like Akamai and Verizon, right? So WAF, application delivery, content delivery network, and all that kind of stuff. On the other side, these micro devices, as we know, are proliferating. Smart devices, IoT devices, things and appliances, the Alexa, Google Home piece, the smart car piece, right? We tend to read a lot about this. And that's almost purpose built to come in and enjoy all this new stuff happening in this POP edge moving out. But for those devices that aren't centered around metro locations or places where a cloud public edge is going to be, 5G is going to be the big game changer there, right? Because we can now penetrate further into the market, or the cloud people can, and get to new kind of developing markets where metro centers aren't, and reach more end users directly in their homes, their living rooms, their cars, etc. And we know 5G is going to proliferate and do that. So the cloud providers are smart. They're going to move their stacks and PaaS capabilities and IoT suites and data analysis suites in these micro cloud, mini cloud pods that will be right there in the 5G. So let's move to the next slide, and I'll show you an example of how this may play out. And I'll move through this kind of quickly to be sensitive to time. So I'm ballparking around 2018, we see what a smart car architecture might look like to take advantage of cloud innovation. Maybe this is a navigation app or a safety app or some customer experience app in a car. So it's just going to pick up an LTE signal and use the internet to do that. And then it's going to run that LTE internet backbone all the way to the cloud edge, and the intelligence lives in the region, right? So latency can be an issue here. Reliability can be an issue here. But in 2018, that's how cloud was. There would be some PaaS thing like a web app or a logic app or a function or serverless or whatever living in the cloud that would be running this, and people would have to deal with the variability of the internet and the security of that. So that started to change right around 2021. Direct connect, express route, private connectivity, and bringing MPLS in becomes more important. So enterprise wants to shrink that last mile. The clouds get a bigger chunk of it. That's private. You see that orange arrow on the right-hand side. Their fiber, dark fiber, leading into these colos, these meet-me's, picking up these things with direct connect and express route. Thus, the last mile is shortened. And what happens is on the backside of that LTE tower is actually a private signal from that LTE carrier, like Verizon, for example, did a great job of this. And it's all RFC 1918 on the back half of that to the meet me. So really almost that back half of the purple arrow is also orange. You know, it's not really a true internet last mile. 2024, again, with like Azure local zones and HCI stacks, move it into these actual meet me's. You see the intelligence of the cloud moving out of the region, be closer to the app. Again, the latency, and if you're slow, you're down. The apps become control planes and motherships where it's just you know, babysitting and phoning home that's happening, but the real muscle is happening here in these cloud stacks and the colos. That again, by 2027, I predict we're going to see that moving up firmly in the 5G or LTE hotspots themselves. Just for the same reasons, because speed is key and customer experience is key. And finally, by 2030, you're going to see through these initiatives that are emerging now, like AWS Wavelength, Azure for Operators, and Google Operator Edge, them actually taking control of the 5G space, making that their own network and partner whole. And then the most of the ecosystem living in the smart device. And then we have a baby cloud right there on that LTE or 5G hotspot. And then it's all just control plane. So that's what I mean by last mile to last meter. When you're interacting with cloud, it's going to be in your car, in your living room, in your kitchen, in your backyard, etc.
Excellent. Brian, thanks so much, man. I've got some questions for you, but because of time, we'll keep moving here. I may come back to you at the end during the Q&A section.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot to say about security in this space, so maybe we'll take some questions about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, great. Yeah. So next, let's turn this over to Noman Mustafa. Noman, you know, one of the promises of the cloud right now, you know, especially to certain verticals or just horizontally in terms of benefits, is this idea that AI ML is going to solve everything for us. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the reality there and what that means for enterprises.
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting trend, and probably I will not have a way to figure out whether I was correct in my prediction or not. But in my opinion, the cloud offered, right? So key point is cloud offered or cloud hosted AI services and augmented intelligence. Augmented intelligence, for people who don't know, is a combination of AI and human intelligence combined together to help customers. I think it will be more prominent, much more prominent in this year. And a lot of it is because most of the businesses are transforming themselves. They were already on the path of digital transformation, but now with the advent of with the machine learning and deep learning models, they are continuing to mature. The neural networks are continuing to mature. So, and most importantly, people, as they are becoming technology savvy, they're also becoming very much informed about things that are available, like AI, right, to help them get competitive advantage as well as to improve customer satisfaction. So we are starting to see this in pretty much all the verticals, whether it's retail, healthcare, manufacturing, finance. You see this, and the key part to this is, a lot of businesses, they will start to rely on compute and storage hosted and provided by the customers, whether it's offered by customers or customers leveraging the infrastructure of the cloud providers. And also, they don't have to employ their own data scientists. They can leverage the services available or created by CSPs or vendors who are offering the services through the CSP infrastructure. Software companies like Informatica and Verint are a great example. They are Aviatrix customers, long-term customers. They're providing actionable intelligence. And the way they do it is basically they capture the data from customers, whoever the end customers are, and then they are able to then leverage the infrastructure and compute power of the CSPs and run their AI and machine learning models to provide actionable intelligence. This is just an example of how you can service customers. A good example in this where it's a well-published example from a young boy in Japan, right, whose parents are farmers. They do cucumber farming, and he saw that his mother spent 8 hours a day sorting out 8 different types of cucumbers. So cucumber sorting is a 8-hour a day task, which was painful for him to see because it is not resulting into a direct revenue for the family, right? So what they were able to do is they were able to use GCP TensorFlow. They had cameras connected to a Strawberry Pi, and then be able to get that images sent out over into the cloud and be able to do that sorting for it, which reduce the amount of 8 hours into minutes, right? So this is just a good example of how businesses are leveraging AI in machine learnings. And I think this year probably we will not see heavy use of deep learning models, but what you will see is a low code, no code type of AI applications where you're able to get information about your business and be able to provide competitive advantage or to help out customers. Another service that I like a lot from AWS is called AWS Comprehend. I'm a big fan, especially in the healthcare industry, right? When you're trying to diagnose a problem, timing is everything. If you are able to diagnose things quickly, you're able to provide treatment in a much more quicker fashion. And that Comprehend service takes unstructured data, right? Like a lot of prescriptions that are handwritten and convert them into a digital format. And then now you're able to run a lot of AI on top of existing information that's out there in the globe in terms of, okay, that was the problem, that was the symptoms, and this was a successful treatment. And now you're able to provide that treatment in a much more quicker format to the end customers. Same thing with Azure AI, right? So it's becoming extremely important in the FinOps market where they're able to provide quality services to the end customers. So the point that I'm trying to make here, right, is in all of these examples, if you see, it's all about how can we provide a secure connectivity of data, right, from the users or from the point of where the intelligence is being collected all the way to the cloud, and then have leverage the power of AI services to provide you the competitive advantage. So this is something I will see that there will be a trend of how can you build this infrastructure. It should not be an afterthought in terms of how I'm going to connect to different customers, different users, feed that data in a secure fashion to the cloud and be able to leverage. And it could be in GCP, it could be in Azure, it could be in Google, it could be in Oracle, doesn't really matter, but having that consistent architecture to have simplified connectivity and secure connectivity to be able to leverage this is going to be very important. And in my opinion, AI leveraging technology or the cloud specific technology is no longer a good to have. It could be an existential threat, because think about Home Depot versus Lowe's, right? How can you make sure that you have the right intelligence to make smart decisions on how your customers are shopping, at what time are they coming in, what are the complaints that they have, in which season they buy what things. All of these are becoming part of your strategy for a better selling and to help customers in a much more effective manner. So use of AI and leveraging the infrastructure and having that consistent infrastructure which you can leverage to connect to those users and clients would be very, very important this year.
Thanks, Daman. That's great. Just on the heels of Brian Woodworth's conversation, I mean, obviously there's some parallels there between, as Edge, we talk at retail as a service and, our smart grocery stores and things like that, where a lot of that data gets sort of ingested, and then how that ties into sort of the machine learning and AI. Do you see that those two worlds will be sort of closely related going into this new year?
Yeah. And Brian, I wanted to ask this question when you were talking, but I think
sure,
it's important, very, very important for cloud operating model to extend down to the edge. Edge cannot be treated as an entity of its own, because all of these smarts needs to have a cohesive network all the way from cloud down to the edge. And I think we can talk about something that Aviatrix is innovating on as well in terms of Aviatrix Edge, which will extend that cloud intelligence and operating model with same security and visibility all the way down to the edge. And then you are able to basically do very smart things and be able to connect and provide that data all the way from customer homes, from branches, from oil rigs, no matter what the use case may be, but then feed the data back to the Azure AI or SageMaker or whatever the services you want to leverage. And you are also then not limited by the compute power, because as an organization, you don't want to be investing things that you can use on an on-demand basis. You want to be able to leverage, because a lot of these deep learning models that you will have would require a lot of compute power, and it will be on demand. So there's a very good connection in terms of cloud, extending down as opposed to edge having its own entity.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, great points. I think we've actually had some questions in the chat related to Brian's edge conversation, so I'm definitely coming back to him at the end of this thing. But that's a great point. Glad you were able to add that in. Okay, so now let's hit our next topic. For this one, we're going to go over to Hamad. And, Hamad, it's interesting to me how this particular topic really ties into everything that we've talked about so far. And I think, your prediction sort of highlights that that's not really going to change, right? So to talk a little bit about some of the staff shortage and skills gaps that we're seeing going into 2022.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. And actually, you're absolutely right. Like Shahzad, Woody, Naman, you've predicted what I was going to predict, because all the technologies that you're mentioning, right? A lot of these are technologies that people have not even heard of. And Brian, you're talking about stuff that CSPs and others are thinking to build, right? Or they are already building, but it's not GA'd, or it's GA'd in a very small footprint, and the bigger versions and the larger scale versions are still to come out. So, but the pace at which these things are going to come out, right? That and the pace at which the enterprise would want to adopt these things. At the end of the day, the question is, who is going to do it, right? At the end of the day, it has to be people, right? You need people, and then about the people, the question is, do they have the skill set that enterprises need and these new technologies need in the timelines that's needed to be implemented? And the answer is not really pretty. So my prediction for 2022, at least this year, and not super long term, because people catch up, the skills skill up and all that kind of stuff happen, and we've seen that in ages. But for 2022, my prediction is that in terms of cloud and cloud technologies and cloud adoption, the skill set shortage in the marketplace will become one of the most critical bottleneck in cloud adoption for enterprises. And if you look at how big is this a skill gap, and the thing is, as I briefly mentioned, that there's a sizable gap in the tech knowledge and what the companies are attempting to do. Some of the stuff that you guys mentioned, but that's a small piece of the entire footprint, and the cloud is expanding in all possible directions. The enterprise are going to cloud, they're going to multi-cloud. So there's this huge gap between what they have on their staff and what they need to have in their staff in order to accomplish the goals. And traditionally in these situations, as an enterprise, what do? You go out in the marketplace and you hire more people. But what we are finding is that there's just a complete lack of people in marketplace that have the skills they need in order to bring them in and work with the technology they need to use, right? So then the pace of both the things, the pace of at which the services are coming, like you blink and there are 3 more services are announced, right? So the pace at which these services are coming out, and then enterprises, when they're looking at these services, they're like, they realize, oh, this is something that I didn't have available, but now that it's available, I need to use it, right? So for that, the pace at which enterprise want to adopt the technology is also increasing. So what that does, it puts pressure on the marketplace looking for more skilled people, and the time crunch is huge. Everybody's about time to market. New service come out, I already need to adopt it, and I how do I adopt it is a challenge when it comes to people. So from Aviatrix perspective, when we look at the cloud has a lot of different things, applications, databases, this and that. And one of the key things is network and network infrastructure. So oftentimes what you'll see is the applications are gonna, actually all the time, I want to see is that applications run in the cloud that they run the best in, right? So typically for an application, if it runs in, let's say, AWS or Azure or GCP, whichever is the best cloud for it, it's going to run there. So you don't necessarily need the same feature set of that application in every cloud, but networking is different. For networking, because you need a consistent network and network security across multiple clouds. So the kind of feature set that you need in the network stack need to be consistent. So from Aviatrix perspective, in order to help the workforce, which is focused on networking and network security, to bridge the gap and for them to skill up as soon as possible, reusing the networking and network security knowledge of decades that they have in the cloud, we've come out with this program called ACE. So Aviatrix Certified Engineer. It's a multi-cloud networking and network security focused program. So it's not going to solve all of your problems, but at least in the network and network security realm, this is the go-to place for people to skill themselves up, because the way it's architected is that you start with AWS 101 networking and Azure 101 networking and GCP 101 and OCI 101 and Ali 101. So basically, in a short amount of time as a network engineer, you now know how the networking pieces work in the cloud, right? And there are like about 16,000 people already on the certification. And this year, another prediction for our internal folks is that I see this certification just skyrocketing. So that's my prediction. Skill set gap is going to be a big blocker. And we just see that that every day in our own like hiring and team building as well.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Ahmad. We're going to keep this moving, but I've got a couple of questions to come back to you with as well here once we get to the Q&A section. So for our last prediction, I want to turn this over to Manny Calero. Manny, look, end of the year, AWS had a really bad week, my friend. They got hit with a couple of different outages, and it's not picking on AWS. These things happen. Azure's been hit. GCP's been hit. I think, enterprises definitely are starting to feel this and look at this a little bit differently. Talk to us about CSP outages going into 2022.
Yeah, three in December. I mean, that speaks for itself. And as 2021 ends and we're looking forward to 2022, our prediction is we're going to continue to see that grow. That's not to say that there aren't things we can do to mitigate those and to be prepared. But we do see that increasing coming in 2022. And as more enterprises embark in that cloud journey, or existing customers, continue to expand, that footprint is going to continue to expand. And inevitably what happens is, that everything grows in scale, more workloads moving into the cloud. The cloud providers are increasing the number of services they provide. Their footprint grows massively, and to add to everything I'm saying here, the complexity multiplies as well. And that basically is part of the cause for some of these outages that happen. And then, what our customers and potential customers and the market should be conscious of is the fact that hyperscalers are very brilliant. They have really smart people. They create amazing services and features and incredible products. However, it's still hardware, software, power, and obviously this is all created by people, right? And the networks and the software is created by people, operated in a lot of instances by people. And some of the outages we saw last year were caused by human error. Some of the major ones. Another reason we see is a lot of the cloud services that are created are sometimes created in a single region in terms of control plane, the care and feeding of the service. Sometimes it's concentrated in a single region. Last year we saw, an AWS region disappear for about an hour, right? So those risks are out there. And, another thing I wanted to touch up on is what Shahzad mentioned. So cyber attacks targeting CSPs is going to continue to grow. 1990s attacks are still in the network and in the internet. And everything from the 90s even to now, it's continuing to grow. It's just a compoundment of attacks that just keep adding to the network and the complexity of and the targeted attacks on CSPs. So that's not going to stop. That's just going to grow. We're going to see that grow. So, how often do we see these outages? Well, in 2021 alone, there were multiple dozens, about 4 dozen outages across, major providers. And, this has been trending for years now. And, some of them lasted a few hours and some of them multiple days. So these are things that we have to be conscious about as we go into cloud. So we do the proper planning and put the right pieces in place to mitigate some of these risks. So, these outages happen, often enough that they need to be considered threats to the business. And I'm sure, anyone is in this webinar here and has some type of footprint in cloud has had to work through these and try to put some mitigation steps in place. So is it a threat to businesses? Yeah, absolutely, right? A lot of businesses, put all their eggs in a single basket. They put their businesses in the cloud, and when these things happen, these outages happen, it obviously affects their business, affects their revenue. So some of these outages has affected business for multiple days, right? We had, like I said, a region disappear for an hour. That isn't good. These are things that we have to be conscious of, and outages in 2021 caused major disruption to business and revenue. So now we talk about these outages, all of these risks. So what can we do, right? In terms of, what we can do, here's two important things we can do. Adopt a multi-cloud, multi-region strategy. You have to do that. That's critical. You have to build redundancy. You have to build resiliency. And, this will greatly reduce the amount of downtime that you would experience during one of these outages. And another piece is, as I mentioned, we talk about cybersecurity and those risks. Make a cloud security, make it a priority, right? Cloud brings a lot of opportunity, but that comes with risk. So legacy security approaches are okay. They're not completely obsolete. You still have to leverage them, but cloud is another paradigm, and things work differently in cloud. So enterprises need to evolve their security posture, especially in the cloud, and start to look of innovative solutions that are capable of providing those layers of security in cloud. So although we predict that these outages will continue to happen, there are steps that you can take to build that redundancy, the resiliency, and we think the Aviatrix platform is uniquely positioned to address these ongoing concerns in clouds. And how do we do this? So we allow enterprises to build that redundancy and the resiliency just out of the box. It's the nature of our platform. We build everything in HA. It's single cloud, multi-cloud, multi-verve, everything, all the types of environments you can put out there. And we simplify that process of doing that. We also, as Aviatrix, as a company, we have a wealth of experience. I would put our experience, our solutions architects, against the whole industry in terms of experience in cloud and what we're able to do. That's what we bring to customers. A lot of times it's the, you don't know what you don't know. Well, we've lived it. We've worked closely and collaborated with our partners, our customers that we love, and we bring that wealth of knowledge to them and help them through those gotchas and those pitfalls so it doesn't happen to them. So, I'll leave it with this. 2022, we'll see more of these outages, but we're well positioned to help our customers move through those and build a resilient infrastructure to actually navigate through those.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much, Manny. Definitely appreciate it. So thanks to everybody, to all of the Aviatrix folks who have joined. I want to just take a couple of questions real quick and throw them out to the group before we close out. Brian Woodworth, I want to come back to you. One of the things that you mentioned, and actually, Shahzad, I'd love your input here as well. One of the things that you talked about was sort of, the edge. Yeah, it could be, a data center, it could be a retail branch, but really it's going to look like a lot of different things, a connected car or an escalator, in a mall. And, so that potentially starts to open the door to a million different types of protocols and rules and capabilities of what's available down there. What does that really mean when we talk about sort of integrating that into the cloud, and more specifically, and Shahzad, to a little bit of your talk track, what does that mean from a security perspective?
I'll take first crack at it, and then of course I'll let Shahzad, who's focusing on security, follow up. So briefly, from my angle, there's a couple of things that are going to happen here, but I can speak to two important trends that I think are going to cause a lot of headache and heartache in the security space, network security space. So remember how I showed that tiered architecture evolving, moving, kind of like a butterfly evolving or whatever. Not every workload's going to make it that far, right? Some will get trapped in the middle or somewhere halfway or a little further because, humans always move on to the next thing. Enterprise moves on to the next thing. Applications seem to be fine where they are. People accrue tech debt. Not everything is going to undergo complete metamorphosis. And you think about how many devices are out there, how many lines of business are out there, and how many lines of business a big enterprise runs, right? Something like a big car manufacturer or a financial services company or something. So you're talking about this crazy quilt work mix and match of different architectures kind of existing in perpetuity. And then you think about the fact that each of these different lines of business are going to have different application owners with their proclivities and tastes for clouds, are going to be playing across multiple clouds. So the landscape is going to be wild and very unpredictable for security, right? You're going to have different architectures in different phases across different clouds. And then finally, when you look at these smart devices themselves, that's going to be tough to secure, right? Then any cam problems, they have a lot of embedded logic. There aren't FPGAs. They're ripe for attack. So, yep, that's my input.
Yeah, so I would actually add on to that because when you look at these new type of services, the IoT services or even the edge services, don't think of them as a separate entity, okay? So because the cloud is actually extended to those. So they are becoming part of cloud. So they're not like beyond cloud, right? So when you are designing and architecting your security, think of them as cloud. A Nike shoe could well be its own VPC. You never know, right? The Tesla car, or these connected cars, they have their own region, they have their own VPC, right? So when you think about providing the security services, think about the architecture, which is already extended to those edges and those IoT services. And I will go back to my network security piece again, right? So if your security is part of your network, then you don't need to think about it. Because if you consider this Nike shoe or this connected car an entity of its own, then you need to protect it with the firewall. And then you need to worry about all the protocols, and things are changing, right? But if you have this pervasive security, the cloud extended to those pieces, those IoT services or edge services, and if you build the proper security model, then it's all part of it. Then you don't need to worry about it. Your packet is flowing in, going through for example, AVITX gateway. AVITX gateway is providing this pervasive security. There is no need, there is no afterthought. So that's how you need to think about providing security to those new type of services.
Great. Yeah, thanks, guys. All right, one more question before we close this out. This one I'll throw to Hamad and Noman to get input on. Hamad, you hit the skills gap on a couple of different areas. I think one of the things that we've all seen when talking to customers is a desire to start embracing infrastructure as code and Terraform. And oftentimes it's almost like, that can be a little bit of a stopgap to the learning curve, because if I can automate myself out of this problem, I have to eliminate the amount of people that I have to uplift. Do you see automation or IAC Terraform playing into some of the skills gap conversations, or is that a bad way to go?
So that's actually very good question. It has multiple dimensions to it. Number one is the network and networking team is not traditionally very familiar with infrastructure as code. So that they're right there. You have the first skill set gap kind of coming in, right? The second thing is that the infrastructure as code is great for the most part for a build exercise. Hey, I need to build. Okay, I'm going to code it, and it's a repeatable thing. If I have infrastructure that's repeatable, I can code it, and I can source control this and those kind of things. So that's really great that it can help you with build part. But where the flip side of the coin, it's not. I mean, it's inevitable. Everybody has to and must do infrastructure as code, but don't be blind to the second side. The second side of that is day two operations, right? So yeah, you can write a code that can build something, but then how is your team who has to support it going to support it? So one of the customers that I was talking to, they said that we have everything set up from landing zones to VPC VNet creations to blah, 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 everything via code. I can push a button, everything is going to get done. But the moment my team needs to troubleshoot, they're like a deer in a headlight, because nobody wants to troubleshoot a connectivity issue in a Terraform code, right? So you got to kind of broaden your horizon that yes, infrastructure as code is going to help me. Maybe, I don't need as many people on a day-to-day basis for build exercises, but most of the time that enterprise spend are in the day two side of things. So you still need that skill set so they can understand what was written in the code, but then have the tools to operationalize it and support it. So from an Aviatrix perspective, the answer is Copilot. So use Terraform or infrastructure as code to build it, but then you must have a tool like Copilot to help you operationalize that.
Yeah.
Great.
I just want to add to what Hamad said. I think infrastructure as a code is now mandate for a lot of organizations for business agility. Also, it provides you a always recoverable, auditable infrastructure, right? Which is what basically meets compliance needs, also handles the skill gaps. But I think I want to come back and also say what Shahzad mentioned about security, what Manny said about outages, right? Hamad said about skill gap, and also it comes to what Brian said about edge. But I think that if you overall look at the journey of customers, right, people, they start from, okay, I have a data center that's shutting down. I have to move 50 applications. I'm on a timeline crunch. I'm under pressure. And normally what they end up doing is a knee-jerk reaction. I have my DevOps team, they swap the credit cards, they go and talk to AWS and Azure. So a lot of these specifics, so they mostly focus on applications, right? And security, the visibility, the scalability, the business continuity, right? These are all afterthoughts. I think one of the advice from me is obviously you have to skill up, but you also have to look at why you need to skill up and what are the needs and considerations that you have to make. Because early days of science projects and I'm going to go and spin up application workload is gone. Now you're talking about mission critical applications moving in, where an outage of even few minutes can cause a major business disruption, right? So having the understanding of what you need to consider before you even move to the cloud, and I'm not saying that you slow down your journey, right? But having a conversation with cloud architects who have been there, done that, and I think this is something we provide at Aviatrix as well. No matter what your journey is, no matter what you're trying to do, but what the considerations are around security, around visibility, around business continuity, and making sure that your teams are trained with the right skill. And I think this is what we see every day with our Aviatrix certifications, where people who are really, really good in on-prem and they have been doing and managing their workloads or in their data centers, now they want to get ramped up and fast track the knowledge to be able to handle their business. And this is something I would recommend to everybody, no matter how small the cloud footprint is, to start and have the conversation on what are the key things I need to be looking at, what are the skills I need to acquire, and how do I do that, right? So we provide this path for enterprises to follow along, especially from a cloud networking and security space. We are doing a good job. So to leverage that, and you will be able to successfully manage the cloud deployments for your environments.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, Naman and Hamad, and really to all the panelists today. So for the attendees, we've just thrown up a quick poll. Would love to hear your feedback. We have some upcoming events where we'll be sort of double clicking on the security conversation a little bit deeper. We'll dive into what Aviatrix really means with secure cloud networking and unpack that a little bit, as well as dive into one of our recent feature announcements, ThreatIQ with ThreatGuard, and how that's one of the first multi-cloud native ways of distributed security inspection and enforcement in the multi-cloud. So be sure to tune into those. Those will be really good. For folks who may be new to Aviatrix or want to learn a little bit more, we're interested by some of the conversations that we had today. There are a couple of resources available to you, some specific to security and in the multi-cloud network checklists. However, all of the gentlemen who are on the phone today are part of the architectural design teams and are happy to speak with you and your organizations about any of the topics that we've covered today, or what some of our other customers are doing inside of cloud, how they're finding success or not, and the things that they're running into. As Hamad mentioned, specific to the skills gap point, we also have our ACE platform, the Multi-Cloud Network Certification Program. We have everything from self-paced to instructor-led. It starts at the associate level, where you're learning sort of some basic 101s about all the cloud providers with a little bit of Aviatrix along the way, all the way up into our design architect and expert. So we can run the full gamut on that, but it's a great way to start to get a feel for Aviatrix and what Aviatrix in the platform is all about, as well as even learn a little bit about native CSP constructs if you're going into a new cloud or just want to uplift a little bit. With that's the end of our presentation. Thanks so much for your time, and we will see you guys on the next one.